What's up, folks? Jumping on again today. I'm actually jumping on to talk about conversation I've had this past weekend and just kind of reveal how I go about in my everyday dealings or interactions with people. And let me know if you said this before to yourself or out loud or whatever. Oftentimes in frustration, why don't they just use the good sense God gave them? And that's usually used for when we're talking to somebody, the light bulb ain't clicking, or people are just making uh dumb acts or movements or the can't seem to find the logic train. Why don't they just use the good sense God gave them? And I too used to uh vent that frustration and say that very thing. What clicked for me, or what changed in me years ago, I used to have a job in customer service as a phone rep. And anybody who's ever done that job before know that some of these phone calls can be very challenging, and some of these phone calls you're left wondering, do you have any good sense about you? But I said that out loud after a phone call, just frustrated. I wish people would just use the sense God gave them. A guy I worked with, an older gentleman, he said something that changed my life. I promise you, changed my view on things. And he said, "What makes you think that God gave them sense?" And it's like, you might be right. It's not a guarantee that God gave him sense. And it's having sense, common sense, or whatever, is like any other ability or attribute. Some have it, some don't. Some people are fast. Some people are tall. Some people are smart. Some people, are good with their hands. Some people are more intellectual. There are traits that not everybody has. And so maybe sense is one of those traits. And when you step back and think about it in its totality, it makes sense that a lot of people don't have sense. And so in those conversations I had with people, I'm all about extending grace, and grace a lot of times is stepping outside of your own self and what you think, and just baseline accepting people as they are, not levying, unfair or unrealistic expectations on people, not holding up a bar to people in good behavior or bad behavior, and being able to deal with the humanity of a person. That to me is what grace is recognizing the humanity of a person, recognizing the flawed humanity of people. And so that's why it's so important to extend grace, because people are just acting or behaving in their nature. They're going for what they know. And so recognizing that everybody isn't afforded the blessing of sense, it makes you realize why some people elevate in leadership, why people, have leaders, why some folks, lead whole groups of people into the direction and can mend the thoughts of men towards because a lot of people don't have sense to come to that conclusion on their own. Look at, folks like Malcolm X or MLK or Moses, or these are people who became leaders of a whole group of people to lead them in the direction that they probably should go, because most didn't have the sense to know that it's one thing to recognize that your situation is bad. It's another thing to think about academically enough what can be done to rectify that situation. That's why it's speaking from a faith, the realm of faith. That's why it's important to have a good shepherd. That's why Jesus is our shepherd. And we're his flock. A pastor has a flock. People who are leaders in the community or political leaders or whatever they have a flock, and they tasked with leading a group of people in thought. It's in a certain direction, but at any rate, with me, with that question, the framing of that question, what makes you think God gave everybody sense? That changed how I then approach people or deal with people, at least on the onset. And this may sound terrible. However, if you really think about it, it probably makes some sense. Assuming God gave you sense. But I think a lot of our frustration is that we assume people are as thoughtful or as intelligent or have the same sensibilities that we have. And so when people do or behave in ways that just don't make sense to us or illogical, or you see how you can see the clock mechanism turning in their head, like, and you're being slow. And I know it's not politically correct to call people slow anymore, but you're being slow. I think that's where the disappointment come in from. We're setting ourselves up to be disappointed, when oftentimes we know, just in general, most people aren't that bright. Most people aren't that smart. And having sense or good sense or common sense, however you want to name it, is typically an attribute of intellect, so varying levels of intellect. It's not always true. That's not always the case. There are smart people who lack sense. When I was growing up, I was very academically successful. And my oldest sister, she used to tell me all the time, you book smart, but you're not street smart. You don't have common sense. So I could tell you academically what's going on. I can give you the right answer for things. I knew a lot. I didn't have any sense. I didn't know how to apply any of the things that I knew. That was the sense that I lacked. And even though I was young, that stuck with me then too. Like, how can I pound my chest, about how smart I am and all this kind of stuff, and I don't have any sense. And so that for me was a humbling encounter, even though I was young. That was a humbling encounter. But a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people, based on environment, don't have the access or the resources to attain a larger sense of knowledge around them or gain wisdom around them. So there are different variables that go into the formulation of a person's sense. But we know on the surface, sense, a good sense, is oftentimes attributed or an attribute of intellect, and most people just aren't that bright. They're just not that smart. And that's not a knock down of anybody, but we know this. That's why when people show they have higher levels of intellect, we kind of prop them up a bit. They're kind of more heralded. The exception of Elon Musk, and he may be just good at what he does or his area. I don't think he has much sense, but that's just my personal opinion. But hey, it works out. But the way he goes about things has worked out for him, well, business-wise thus far, and that is what that is. But anyway, but understanding that most people just not that bright, I go into new encounters or whatever, just base level of, okay, as opposed to showing me that you're not smart and lead me to disappointment, I would rather you surprise me that you're smart. I come in with no expectations of anybody. I don't care what position they hold. I don't care what job they're doing. I don't care where they're from. I don't care whatever. I have no preconceived concept of how this person should behave until they show me that they're whatever their level of intellect is. I'm not, in a rare instance in my life, I give no benefit of the doubt. I give no benefit of the doubt that you got sense. So when we first meet or talk, initial conversations, I may tend to over-explain things. I may tend to break things down on a more rudimentary level until, as the conversation gets going, you catch the flow of the conversation. You can tell if somebody is picking up what you're throwing down. And then, it goes from there. But on GP, hey, I'm a blank slate, you're a blank slate. And I think that keeps my level of disappointment down when it comes to how I deal with other humans. I recognize the humanity. I start with grace, and then when you're on par with what average people are, you're on par. And then if you show more advanced abilities, then we can act in kind. And I hope the same for me. Hey, don't put no expectations on me when you don't even know me yet. Let me show you, or let it dawn on you, okay, he kind of a bright guy. Or or if I do act to behave in a way that ain't up to what your level of understanding is, then hey, he in this area he don't have sense, or to me he's not a sensible person, and grant me that grace of my humanity. So we got to stop setting ourselves up for disappointment and writing off people, or then once we've been disappointed and it dawns on us that maybe this person is that bright, we then treat them that way, and that's not right. And that's what a lot of my conversations kind of center around, is that the treatment of people or how you deal with people, because you feel like they don't have any sense or not using sense. And it's like, and now you get to talking slow, like, when I go to, you start more hand movements and talking slow, and your eyes big when you talk to them, like to confirm, are you listening? You get what I'm saying? That part is what's wrong to me, is when you then start treating people like they're slow, instead of going in already knowing that the likelihood that they're probably slow. So that's the grace that I don't set myself up for disappointment in that way. I go in assuming that most people I encounter aren't that bright. I'm not talking about, high level concepts of science and math and politics and faith even. You encounter a lot of people in church or wherever your institution of worship is, and there's varying degrees of understanding of your faith. There's varying degrees of understanding of the Bible or the text that your faith deals with. And so instead of assuming everybody's on the same level or you're on par with everybody, hey, maybe God didn't give them any sense.